Doctor Who is one of the most popular and influential shows on TV today. It has had a huge impact on millions of people, but something that Doctor Who has never been able to have an impact on is video games. So far in this series, we have gone from bad rip-off arcade games and text adventures to first-person shooters and flash games. However, by the turn of the 2010s, Doctor Who was bigger than ever, with a huge following not only in the UK, but also in the far-off wilderness known as America. Would this wider audience lead to an improvement in Doctor Who's video game journey? Let's find out in this final episode of Doctor Who in the Land of Video Games. The year is 2010. Matt Smith has just successfully taken over from David Tennant as the Doctor. The highly successful Series 5 had just wrapped up, and in November the game Doctor Who Evacuation Earth was released on the Nintendo DS by Asylum Entertainment. This game was the first of two games developed by Asylum, the second being Return to Earth for the Nintendo Wii, but we'll get to that later. Nintendo had signed a £10 million contract to bring Doctor Who to their consoles. So how would Evacuation Earth live up to this expectation? Evacuation Earth is a bad game. It's a really bad game. It has voice acting by Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, which is good, but the graphics are absolutely awful. Even for a DS game, this looks like pure trash. The story revolves around the Doctor and Amy Pond visiting Earth as the last of the starships evacuate the population before solar flares render the planet uninhabitable. Along the way, the usual hijinks occur with Daleks and Silurians appearing. Of course the Daleks show up. It's a Doctor Who game. Curiously, this game is actually a sequel to Return to Earth, despite the Wii game coming out a week later, and the titles of the two seeming to indicate that Evacuation Earth comes first. It's just a weird and confusing decision. In terms of gameplay, Evacuation Earth is basically just a visual novel with some basic mini-games thrown in. Think Professor Layton with Doctor Who slapped on it. That's literally this game. It's obviously aimed heavily towards kids, which means you can cut it a little bit of slack, but it's more of a generic mystery puzzle game than any real effort at bringing the show to the video game format, and I feel bad for anyone who paid the full £35 price tag when it came out. Imagine being a kid older than 10 and getting this for Christmas. You'd probably hate Christmas for the rest of your life. Just a week after Evacuation Earth stank up people's DS's, Doctor Who Return to Earth was released for the Nintendo Wii. Given that it was on a more powerful, more up-to-date machine, would Return to Earth be any better than its DS counterpart? The answer is no, it would not. This game is infamous for having a horrific reception. It was universally panned across the board, for good reason. A lot of people were forgiving of Evacuation Earth because it was aimed towards a younger audience, but Return to Earth would not be able to hide behind such a shield. Return to Earth is a third-person platformer, and my god is it ugly. I know the Nintendo Wii was never exactly known for being a graphical juggernaut, but this game looks so bad. The story is once again focused on the Doctor and Amy Pond aboard one of the starships escaping Earth. It's the same ship, but in the future when it's returning to Earth. Think Ark in Space and Revenge of the Cybermen, or The Long Game and Bad Wolf. As usual, there are Daleks involved, and the Cybermen show up as villains too, because you've got to get all the icons in there somehow. This game is boring as hell. You have to sit through a really long opening before you can even play it, and the first level is an uninspired run from point A to point B while avoiding obstacles. It's not fun to control at all because, well, it's the Wii. Throughout the game you have to use the sonic screwdriver to fire off coloured gems at enemies, which also include floating smiley faces? Ah, my favourite. Return to Earth feels like one of those Wii shovelware games your grandparents got you because the cover looks kind of similar to what you actually asked for. I just can't recommend this game at all. It is one of the worst games I have ever seen. It actually makes Evacuation Earth look good. But hey, at least you could use a cool sonic screwdriver cover for your Wii remote. That's pretty neat. Now it's time to talk about what you're all here for. The adventure games. Unless you're new to Doctor Who or have been living under a rock for the last decade, you'll probably have heard of Doctor Who The Adventure Games. These were a series of third-person games released for computers from 2010 to 2011. They were actually released for free on the Doctor Who website when they came out, which was impressive given their scope. They would later be moved onto Steam before being taken off the platform, but you can still buy the collection in physical format off Amazon if you're willing to throw down 50 quid. The adventure games were released in an episodic format. In total, there were 5 games across 2 series, starting with City of the Daleks in June 2010 and ending with the Gunpowder Plot on Halloween 2011. The adventure games were hugely successful and are still beloved by many people. After all, it's what people had been clamouring for years. A fully voiced, fully 3D, third-person Doctor Who game. And not only was it exactly what people had wanted, it was also completely free.
And that's a great price!
The adventure games are actually quite impressive for what they are. Each game has an in-depth and creative story. From Cybermen in the Arctic to Vashta Nerada underwater, the stories are all really good, which is no surprise as they were almost all written by Phil Ford, who had written the beloved Doctor Who episode Waters of Mars, and episodes for the Sarah Jane Adventures and Torchwood. There are also a lot of nods to continuity, such as the Varga plants appearing for the first time since Dalek's Master Plan. The adventure games are aimed at kids, so they're not particularly hard. There's a lot of sneaking around and basic puzzles, but at least the full voice acting and good stories make up for it. However, even though the Gunpowder Plot kicked off a planned Series 2 of the adventure games, the whole thing was cancelled in favour of more games like this next one. In May 2012, Doctor Who The Eternity Clock was released on PC, PlayStation 3 and something called PlayStation Vita? Whatever that is. This game was made by Supermassive Games. If that name sounds familiar, you'd be right. Just 3 years later they would release a little game called Until Dawn for the PS4. You may have heard of it. I do love the cover of The Eternity Clock. Like, what is this? Does weird digital Matt Smith know something we don't? The Eternity Clock was flashy and new, being made in Unreal Engine, one of the most cutting edge and famous tools for developing games. It definitely looks the part, being announced with a really sleek trailer, but the gameplay just doesn't really live up to expectations. Despite being a fully modelled 3D game, it's a side-scrolling platformer, not exactly what people associate with Doctor Who. And hey, Doctor Who games are cool and all, but do you know what they really need? Seriously, River, do you think you could maybe cover up just a little bit more? There are kids playing this game. You control the Doctor and River Song in this game. The Doctor uses a sonic screwdriver whilst River Song uses a gun, and the story revolves around finding the pieces of the Eternity Clock. But the whole game just feels like wasted potential. Everything looks great, for the PS3 at least, but the game is just pushing a bunch of boxes around. It gets quite annoying, and that's without even mentioning all the mini games. Worst of all, when the game came out it was filled to the brim with bugs. Even Billy the Exterminator would struggle to fix this game. However, Supermassive Games stuck with the game and worked to fix all the bugs, but it was too little too late. The game received pretty negative reviews across the board, leading to the planned sequels being put on hold, aka completely cancelled. I do find it quite funny that the adventure games were cancelled for this new series, which also ended up being cancelled. The Peter Capaldi era of the show didn't really have any huge releases, mainly just the Flash games and mobile games I spoke about last time. There was a weird Skype bot thing that never really took off, but there was also the first step towards the so-called future of gaming, virtual reality. In mid-2017, Time Vortex 360 was released for phones and VR devices. The game is really simple. You just fly the TARDIS through the vortex and collect orbs to keep going. It's basically a 360-degree version of a Flash game that came out almost a decade earlier. But this was just the beginning of Doctor Who in VR, and it was probably more of a proof of concept than anything else. Not so was The Runaway, an interactive VR episode released in early 2019, riding off the back of the successful Series 11. This was a lot different to Attack of the Grask all the way back in 2005. There are two versions available, both for free, which is nice. The main version is the interactive experience, which lasts around 13 minutes, and the other version is simply a 360-degree video of the game basically playing itself for 11 minutes. Jodie Whittaker voices her incarnation of the Doctor, but her character model just looks kind of unsettling. It feels wrong, kind of like an uncanny valley sort of thing, but that's probably just me. The Runaway is fully animated and definitely comes off as more of a game, but even in the interactive version you can't really move around. You just have to stand there as the events play out in front of you. It's a shame because there was a lot of potential, but it's still good for what it is. Unfortunately, the BBC VR Hub, who created the interactive episode, has since shut down, so I wouldn't expect any more interactive episodes like this one. And that brings me to now. We've covered 4 decades of Doctor Who games, but here we are at last, the most recent Doctor Who game, and it might even be the best of the bunch. Doctor Who: The Edge of Time was released in November 2019. This is a VR game developed by Maze Theory, a relatively new and upcoming studio. This game is utterly stunning, it looks amazing. In Edge of Time, you control an unnamed nobody who gets pulled into a dramatic adventure with the Doctor, who is trapped at the end of the universe and can only communicate with you through audio. It's in VR, so the movement is limited. VR games can be hit or miss, but I feel like Edge of Time is not only a good Doctor Who game, but a good sci-fi game in general. The Daleks and Weeping Angels appear along with Hydrox, a new monster created for the game. I am not surprised they implemented the Weeping Angels because people have been clamouring for Weeping Angels in VR for a long time now. I also love how they were able to completely nail the TARDIS being big on the inside. It looks amazing in VR. I also really like the soundtrack, composed by Richard Wilkinson. The music achieves a great blend between the styles of Murray Gold and Segun Akinola. A few days before the game was released, you could download the full soundtrack for free, which was a really nice gesture by Maze Theory. It's just a shame that Edge of Time is VR only. I'd have to sell my organs on the black market just to afford to play this game. Edge of Time has a few bugs, but from what I've seen, Maze Theory is committed to the game, staying in touch with the community and working to fix these bugs. They're all clearly fans of the show, which is a great sign because it means they're passionate about their game and want it to be as good as it could be. And I think at the end of the day, that's one of the most important things for a Doctor Who game. It needs to have people involved who truly care about the show and the game they're making. The 2010s were one of the biggest periods for both Doctor Who and its attempts to cement itself in the landscape of video games. For the first time, it was clear that the BBC wanted Doctor Who to become a gaming institution, rather than just shitting out games with Doctor Who lazily slapped on them. Even though this still happened with games like Evacuation Earth and Return to Earth, the adventure games and Edge of Time were definitely a step in the right direction. With the success of Edge of Time, hopefully we start seeing more actually good Doctor Who games coming in the near future. Throughout this short series, we've been on a wild ride, seeing the highs and lows of Doctor Who games. It's mostly been lows, but there have been some good games along the way. I really don't think it's any surprise that Doctor Who games have had such a torrid history. I personally think that they're just too difficult to make. Without the budget of proper AAA titles, there's not much games can do to capture the spirit of Doctor Who. And besides, what would a truly successful Doctor Who game even look like? Everyone wants something different from it. Some people want an open world RPG, some people want a VR experience, other people just want a narrative episodic game like Telltale games. You can't appeal to every Doctor Who fan at once. And much like games based on films and TV, you can never capture what people like about the franchise. Doctor Who isn't as versatile as something like Star Wars when it comes to gaming, and it certainly doesn't have the same appeal or budget. But what do you think? Can a Doctor Who game ever work out? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.